on the right, their advertisers pay them, and the Washington Post, a lot of clicks on the left. So they're competing for clicks, and what the result of that is that if you write the objective article, who clicks on that? It's just the truth, and the truth can be a little boring, I guess.
That's correct. That's exactly right. When you were in Auschwitz, you know, it's a shame that here we have a congressman that went and viewed it firsthand, one of our Iowa congressmen, and you have to spend all the time defending yourself. But I want to give you an opportunity here to tell you, you and your wife Marilyn, correct, ended up going to Auschwitz. Tell me, Steve, what was the feeling when you walked into that place? Give me that. That's something that the press doesn't want to print that because it doesn't sell enough newspapers. But you know what? Let me hear what your heart says about that, and let that speak to the anti-Semitism criticism that's going on about you.
Well, I'm really grateful for In the Depths, the organization that sponsored this. We took that trip with Eddie Mossberg, who was a survivor of Auschwitz. He's about a 95-year-old gentleman from New Jersey. And we arrived at Birkenau, which is about 3 miles from Auschwitz. And when you look, we went up to this, I guess it'd be not quite a tower, but a higher facility where you could look out over it all. And you look across there and you see that there's bunkhouses there for tens of thousands of people to be in. And then Eddie stood there and told us about what he had lived through. But the rail line comes into the middle of that and stops right in front of that building that was raised up. It was part of the original structure that we were in, but it's about the 3rd floor up. We're looking across that. And we went down and we walked that rail back to the crematorium. And Eddie talked all the way down. When you see the trains came in and stopped, the rail stops are there. And then there might be, and they could kill 10,000 people a day at Birkenau. And so they would get off the trains and they would march them down to what they called an undressing area. And it looked to me like it was outside. And they were then walked down through this tunnel. It was a tunnel without a top on it, so it was just straight walls. They believed they were walking, men and women and children, down into to have a shower. And they walked them into the gas chamber. We walked underneath there where there's a hole about like that in the roof where they dropped the pellets down in. That were the gas that they used to kill them. And they had then they had the crematorium right there where they put them on racks and pushed them into the fire and burned them to ash. They could process 10,000 a day. And when they brought in more than 10,000, they put them out into the bunkhouses, into the camps. And when they processed, when they didn't bring in 10,000, then they drew from the camps. This was industrialized, ghastly, genocidal slaughter. And you cannot imagine how bad that was. And when you hear that from Eddie Mossberg, and you hear stories like mothers and children, when a mother came with a child, they never let the two of them survive for a day. They went into the gas chambers, because if you have a mother and a child, there's always going to be a big ruckus trying to save that child, and the mothers would scream and fight and do everything to save the life of the child. So what they did, the children were going to be executed no matter what. And they knew that at Birkenau. So they would take that child and put the child into the arms of an older woman to try to save that child's mother. That's just one narrative, just one about what happened there. And then to walk through Auschwitz and see the pictures on the wall, people there with shaved heads, and you look into their eyes and there's a number there and there's a name for many of them. And you walk down this long hallway and there's a glass, and there's the hair that they had shaved off of people's heads and saved it. There must be 150 feet long a display, 16 feet tall this way, sloped this way, which is hair. Not one blonde head in the bunch. Every one of them was black hair or black hair with gray. And something that the public doesn't know, but about 3 million Polish Jews were executed during that period of time, but also 3 million non-Jewish Poles were executed. About 6 million Poles altogether executed by this ghastly Nazi. And then Mark, yesterday in the afternoon, I had a little time after church, and I don't hardly ever go to a movie of any kind, but I went back and looked at the Nazi death camps. And there, when the American military came in, and some British too, they filmed 80,000 feet of film of the ghastly reality of death camp after death camp. They compressed it down to 6,000 feet, which turned out to be about 60 minutes. And I sat and watched all of that yesterday afternoon, because that's the piece that was missing. We saw the camps, we heard the narrative, but we didn't see the videos. And I wouldn't want anybody to watch those videos and think they were going to be asleep at night, but I need to know what happened, and I know what happened.
And you know, this is things that people don't want to publicize. I mean, even the fact of your wife being so overcome with emotion that it was hard for you to even watch your wife go through this. And now for her to hear the remarks against you, knowing that both of you went through that together, and that's what we should print. And that's an answer to the anti-Semitism and these slams that are coming against you. Every man is not without his challenges, and you're not a perfect man, neither am I, and we've made mistakes, but some things just don't warrant the degree of attack that's going on, not only with you, but what's going on in this country. Everybody talks about healing of the country. It's not going to happen if we continue in the vein that we're in. Don't you agree?
I do agree, and in fact I see us dividing more and more. And I believe I mentioned before we went on the air that I think the country is more divided now than it's been since the Vietnam War. Whether it's as divided as that or not, I'm not convinced it is. But I watched as Barack Obama encouraged us to identify ourselves down the lines of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, prosperity versus poverty, any way that we could identify ourselves differently, that we were encouraged to do that. He didn't encourage a lot of violence, but he did encourage us to divide each other, and I had to see ourselves first as those characteristics that are visual to us.
That's correct.
Then Donald Trump used name calling as a way to identify people, and that added to the acrimony. And so he identified people according to short, tall, fat, skinny, robust, lazy, sleepy, Pocahontas, you can go on and on and on. I've never liked the name calling that went on. That's why I didn't engage in that for a long time. None of us are completely absolved of that,
Right.
but I made a concerted effort to stay away from it. And I made a concerted effort not to answer false charges. But I can't do that any longer, Mark. I mean, if anything was proven in this last election, if they've got unlimited funds and they had more money than they knew how to spend, there's money left over, and they doubled their ad buys in the last 2 weeks.
That's correct. That's correct.
So we've got to, but I've got to answer these charges, and I will. And I'm going to have to characterize people for who they are. And I don't want to be vicious about it. I want to be objective.
Sure.
But I've got to do it. Otherwise, and if I don't stand up to this, if I let them do what they want to do, they win.
Yeah.
And then they would then own a different congressman to represent the best people in the world. I have this tremendous gift, and it's a gift to have the privilege to represent the best people in the world. And I don't have to stop and think about that. That's in my head and my heart, and has been for a long time.
That's correct.
And I may well be in the best county in all of America. I make that argument over and over again. The people in Holland, Michigan think that they may have the best county in America. I go, no, you got to come to Sioux County, Iowa.
I used to coach basketball in North Muskegon, which was just up the road there. In fact,
Oh.
my son played for Alma College, and so we spent a lot of time down in Holland. I just, like I said, part of it is the idea of making sure that you've got your voice too. Everybody thinks that you've got carte blanche as far as your voice goes, and it's been proven that that's not the case. And so we wanted to come on today and just give you a chance to speak to us and address some of the issues that are out there and that are pressing right now.
There's one other thing I'd like to add if
Sure.
I can. And I just thinking about this, and that is that, I'm known as the happy warrior in Congress. And I'm going to get my sense of humor back. I'm going to get my zip back. I've got some of it back right now, and I feel a lot better having the election drifted a little bit to the rear here. But I'm just thinking this, that 22 years of public service between the state Senate and the United States Congress. And I told people, you send me to Washington, I will burn the candle at both ends, and when I run out of wax, I'll come home. Well, I'm not out of wax, and nobody better think I am out of wax. But there's something else, and that is, out of all those years of service, I have stood up continually, and I have said, I am pro-life, I'm pro-marriage, I'm pro-constitution, I'm pro-rule of law, I'm pro-free enterprise. I want a smaller government, and I want a balanced budget. I want a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution. I want our wholesome families back again. And those are the principles that I articulated a long time ago, and no one can point to a vote or a statement that deviates from that. I've said that, I want to work with people here. Here's the framework of the convictions. All of us have convictions. I articulated mine as a candidate. Then I want to hang all of the interests of the people on those convictions that can possibly be hung on there. We want to serve everybody as much as we possibly can. And we're in this business to serve and to help. And I owe everybody in this district my best effort and my best judgment. Well, that's going on. I've stood up in front of public meeting after public meeting and said, there's not a person in this room that will stand up to that microphone and say that I've ever told you anything other than the truth, other than what I believe to be true. And even if it was bad news, I brought bad news. Because that's what I owe you as part of best effort and best judgment. But 22 years of all of that, and in the last 13 days of the campaign, they peeled off 20,000 with all of those negative ads and attacks that were there. So if they can forget about 22 years, those 20,000 that went to the polls and otherwise would have voted for me had it not been for that, if they can forget about those